basically what we have here, Senator Mazie Hirono, during the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, you use the term sexual preference to describe those in the LGBTQ community, and let me make it clear. Sexual preference is an offensive and outdated term. It is used by anti-LGBTQ activists to suggest that sexual orientation is a choice. True. So basically, there's a long history of implying that being a certain sexual orientation is like, oh, a straight person just got out of bed one day and was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna be gay today, and then like goes out and like, like a man like butt fucks another man, or takes a dick from a man, and then they're like, wow, this is great. I'm gonna stop being straight now. Um, that's not really how it works. That's not how sexual orientation works. It's also not typically how transgender people work. There might be fringe cases where someone experiencing no dysphoria decides to transition just because they want to, and hey, more power to them. This is America, after all, land of the free. Uh, but yeah, the way that Amy Coney Barrett throughout the hearings has been repeatedly talking about LGBTQ issues by talking about preferences is a dog whistle to to conservatives to basically tell them, yeah, I'm going to be old school. Like, this is outdated terminology. I'm going to be old school about this, aka LGBTQ people, we're not cool.
This
So
morning,
let's
Senator
listen.
Feinstein asked you a question about the Supreme Court's 2015 decision in Obergefell v. Hodges, a case in which the court recognized the constitutional right to same-sex marriage. And I was disappointed that you wouldn't give a direct answer on whether you agreed with the majority in that case, or if you instead agree with your mentor, Justice Scalia, that no such right exists in the Constitution. So even
Now, this has actually been a recurring problem throughout the entire Amy Coney Barrett process to get her on the Supreme Court. Essentially, anytime she's asked a very straightforward question about a given law or a previous ruling, about and she claims to be an originalist, someone who reads just the text of the law and tells it like it is, as the founding fathers intended, despite the fact that it's a couple hundred years later, and the founding fathers in no way could have intended anything about like airplanes. Um, but that's what originalists say that they do, right? So being asked a very straightforward question about the Constitution, like what the Constitution says, or what a given ruling was, or her thoughts on a past ruling, and she has been giving very non-committal answers like, oh, I don't engage in hypotheticals, um, which a Supreme Court judge needs to be able to engage in hypotheticals because their rulings affect literally the entire country. But this has been the way that she has been weaseling out of a lot of the questions during these confirmation hearings. And so what Ms. Hirono is talking about is roughly her tendency to be giving these non-committal, very unsatisfying answers to very simple, direct questions, that some of which have been like yes or no questions, and instead, she's been presenting the hearing with a bunch of stuff that actually doesn't have any bearing on like that she should easily be able to answer. No, in one noteworthy case, she actually wasn't able to list off the every protected element under the First Amendment, which is pretty crucial. The one that she forgot is kind of telling. She forgot the right to protest, the right to assembly, for the purpose of protest. So that's a little bit telling in these current times, I think. So let's continue on with this clip.
even though you didn't give a direct answer, I think your response did speak volumes. Not once, but twice, you use the term sexual preference to describe those in the LGBTQ community. And let me make clear, sexual preference is an offensive and outdated term. It is used by anti-LGBTQ activists to suggest that sexual orientation is a choice. It is not. Sexual orientation is a key part of a person's identity. That
True.
sexual orientation is
True.
both a normal expression of human sexuality and immutable, was a key part of the majority's opinion in Obergefell, which, by the way, Scalia did not agree with. So if it is your view that sexual orientation is merely a preference, as you noted, then the LGBTQ community should be rightly concerned whether you would uphold their constitutional right to marry.
True.
I don't think that you use the term sexual preference as just, I don't think it was an accident. And one of the legacies of Justice Scalia and his particular brand of originalism is a resistance to recognizing those in the LGBTQ community as having equal rights under our Constitution. In 1996, Justice Scalia wrote a dissenting opinion and
Yeah, Noob Tubinator, for like a lot of people, they don't necessarily know what the significance of this is. For a lot of people, I'm sure they heard this and didn't bat an eye. But in the history of the Supreme Court, what Ms. Hirono is talking about is that Justice Scalia actually made it into a huge, made it into a recurring thing, and his insistence that of using sexual preference rather than sexual orientation was done deliberately as a way of, disrespecting LGBTQ people, and Amy Coney Barrett is one of his proteges. So she's continuing on with his tradition of doing the same to LGBTQ people. And for the people who are in the know, aka queer people or people who really hate queer people, like we can pick up on that. But for people who aren't aren't necessarily clued into this stuff, like it totally makes sense that you might not pick up on it. Like that's the entire purpose of a dog whistle, right? Like a dog whistle isn't heard by anyone except for dogs, the ones that are intended to hear the whistle. So yeah, it's from that era of our political discourse where people were arguing, yeah, you can just stop being gay. Why do you keep insisting on choosing to be gay every day? Like it's a conscious choice instead of just like a natural response that people have to seeing someone they find attractive, right? So yeah, and Amy Coney Barrett's insistence on using this is a signal to the far right conservatives who care about, who are still desperately clinging on to the fact that gay people can get married and have like equal protections, and they can't discriminate against gay people. Dog whistling to those kinds of people.
and Romer v. Evans defending a state's ability to openly discriminate against the LGBTQ community. In 2003, Justice Scalia wrote a dissenting opinion in Lawrence v. Texas, defending a state's right to criminally prosecute someone for same-sex sexual activity. 10 years later, in U.S. v. Windsor, Justice Scalia wrote another dissenting opinion, this time defending the federal government's right to deny federal recognition of same-sex marriages. And of course, 2 years after that, in Obergefell, Justice Scalia wrote yet another dissent, and this time he argued that there was no constitutional right to same-sex marriage. So under Justice Scalia's judicial philosophy, which you have told us is your own, states could openly discriminate against the LGBTQ community. Same-sex couples could be denied the right to get married, and they could actually be thrown in jail if they engaged in sexual intercourse. There are an estimated 11 million adults who identify as LGBTQ LGBTQ living in this country since Obergefell was decided in 2015. Approximately 293,000 same-sex couples have gotten married. And many of these people are rightly afraid that if you are confirmed, you will join with other conservative members of the court to roll back everything the LGBTQ community has gained over the past 2 decades and push them back into the closet. Now,
Valid
two sitting
concern.
justices are already calling for Obergefell to be narrowed, if not outright overturned. Just last week, Justices Thomas and Alito issued a statement concurring with the court's decision to deny cert in Davis v. Irmo, a case involving a former Kentucky County Court who refused to issue marriage certificates to same-sex couples. They accused the court of, and this is Justices Alito.
True, boss. Joe Biden was not a proponent of gay marriage, but neither were most people who were in the Senate back then, with maybe the notable exception of Bernie Sanders. But what she's describing here is actually true. 2 of the current sitting justices have expressed their desire to be able to go and overturn past precedents. So one of the things that has been brought up frequently in the Amy Coney Barrett hearings is her position on that as well. So she has been talking about what are called precedents and super precedents. So in her mind, there are precedents that have been set by the court that are in some ways less valid than super precedents, which are things that she has deemed that everyone agrees on, one being like Brown versus the Board of Education. But her reasoning for it is that, most people aren't against Brown versus the Board of Education. But she is for potentially overturning past precedents of the courts, which puts gay marriage back on the menu, puts Roe v. Wade back on the menu for a lot of conservatives, which is part of the reason why so many conservatives are very rabid about getting her on the Supreme Court. So like it should be very apparent, I think, that someone who is both claims to be an originalist, reading the Constitution as written, wants to be able to undo past precedents that she doesn't agree with. I feel like that's a bit of a hypocritical stance, but it's also not going to be anything that stops the conservatives from trying to shove her through the nomination process.
And Thomas. They accused the court of, quote, reading a right to same-sex marriage into the 14th Amendment, even though that right is found nowhere in the text. And these 2 justices signal that Obergefell is a problem that only the court can fix. So, coupled with your use of the term sexual preference, coupled with your view on precedents, and that a justice's view or her own analysis of the constitutionality should overtake or overcome precedents if it's in conflict. So this is why so many people in the LGBTQ community are so concerned that you would, in fact, join the signaling that these 2 justices have already put out there, that Obergefell will fall by the wayside.
Yeah. So basically, Amy Coney Barrett is a Trojan horse to get through these conservative, theocratic ideas into our court system, while also providing a bit of a buffer for Donald Trump in the upcoming election. For example, she seems to concur with his ideas of, being open to a president taking unilateral action to delay elections, for example. She refuses to give clear answers, basically about anything that might eventually, in the future, conflict with something that Donald Trump might do. So there is a little bit of incentives all over the place for her to get into office. Um, Republicans haven't really grasped the concept that Democrat voters don't have to lick boot of their leader. True. I mean, we did literally watch a video yesterday of liberals kissing boots. But that being said, it is not a widespread problem in the least. Despite what our dear friend Treble Clef had to say. Okay. Um, yeah. So Amy Coney Barrett is very worrying, very much a threat to what we have established in this country. Like you heard what she said. She was talking about how there are millions of members of the LGBTQ community out there who have got who are identify as gay openly, and the repeal of some of these constitutional protections that have been established by the Supreme Court would put them in danger of being jailed, like arrested, jailed, discriminated against, even in the arrest and jailing process. And there would be really nothing anyone could do about it because it would be legal. So, like, and not only that, but there are hundreds of thousands of married gay people in this country, and a repeal of that decision affects hundreds of thousands of people on top of that. So it would be a disaster for the United States on a great number of levels, and the only way you could really get behind this is if you actually had some sort of bigotry in your heart towards queer people in general. Like, there's not really any defense of these positions other than the founding fathers wouldn't have written anything about queer people, so obviously the Constitution doesn't protect queers. Like, that's basically all you have right there for an originalist. Because, like, we have amendments against discriminating against people based on gender, right? Like, men and women. And if you're discriminating against someone because they're gay, it's because they're not the right gender for who they're with. So, like, it's pretty straightforward that this should be a legal thing. That this should be, like, incontrovertibly legal. But it's the bigotry fueling the movement that is a direct threat to queer people all across the United States. And it's a scary time. So hopefully, well, there's not really anything that we can do about this, to be 100% honest with you. Like, the Supreme Court is, a different branch of government. There are some things that Democrats maybe could do to slow down the process, or otherwise try and prevent this from happening, but generally they're far too weak to actually put up any kind of a direct fight like that. It would be against the rules, despite not being technically against the rules. It would be against the spirit of the rules, guys. Yeah, I mean, Taylor Swift, I guess you can be excited to fill the seat if you want, like, gay people to lose rights. But, I mean, if that's your goal, like, I guess more power to you, but, you want millions of people to suffer, I guess. Oh, you have nothing against gay people, but, like, you want to fill the seat with someone who does hate gay people. It's pretty astounding how you are able to reconcile those two ideas. I have nothing against gay people. Well, we just went over talking about it, Taylor Swift, but to summarize for you, um, she is in favor of repealing past court decisions. And she's also given non-committal answers when asked very simple, straightforward questions about whether she would be in favor of overturning For example, gay marriage or gay rights in the United States. So she is open to overturning gay rights, and overturning gay rights also coincides with a lot of the things that she has written about in her past work. So uh, I don't necessarily know that she needs to, in her heart, gay people, but if the effect of her getting on the court is disenfranchising or um, putting into danger or threatening millions of queer people across the United States, I would say it doesn't materially matter if she, in her heart of hearts, hates gay people. The effects of her actions are enough for us to judge her by. Right, but the thing is, she's a Supreme Court justice. Her religion shouldn't have anything to do with her rulings, right? Like, you understand that not everyone who lives in the United States is a Christian, so they shouldn't be bound by Christian theology in the legal code. Like, that the United States is explicitly a non-religious country, and it was designed that way by the founding fathers, who had no love of religion. Um, so like saying, "Oh, well, she's religious," that absolves her of having religious bigotry. Uh, I don't agree with you. I'm sorry. I don't think the courts should be packed with religious individuals or people who are going to let their religion interfere with their legal rulings. Yeah. Yeah, we have freedom of religion in this country, so trying to bind everyone else in the country to your religious principles is pretty gross and counter to the actual constitution itself. Yeah, but I personal views are different from your religious views, right? Like you need to be able to decouple those two things. Otherwise, we can't have an actual court system in this country because you're saying, "Oh yeah, if for example, you're being judged by a Muslim judge, and you are like how about let's take a little mental experiment. Like you get to the courtroom and you're a devout Christian and you're sitting in front of a Muslim judge. And they're a devout Muslim judge. In their view, you're heretical. Should you be punished more harshly because that judge, with their personal views and beliefs and the way they interpret the law via their Muslim faith, views you as more degenerate than another than someone maybe of a similar faith to himself? If your answer is that's not how the court system should work, I agree with you. And I 100% think that that same sort of logic should apply to our Supreme Court justices. Um, so yeah, I think your argument that like, yeah, well, if you're a religious person, no, if you're a religious person and you're going to let that affect how you judge the law, you should not be a judge, you know? You render unto Caesar what is Caesar, my friend. You render the law as it is in the United States. You don't try and skimp out of doing that just because you're religious. No, but Taylor Swift, the court is currently on a precipice, and there are multiple other judges on the court who agree with her already and have said as much. So if she gets onto the court, that's the effect that her presence on the court will have. So, like, you saying it seems a bit dramatic, I think you're saying that because you know that it's not going to affect you. Like, if you were facing down the possibility that your husband or your wife would soon be illegal. It would be illegal to be married to your, one true spouse. Would you still be okay with this? Would you be okay with the person you chose to spend your life with suddenly not being valid in the eyes of the law? suddenly not being your actual husband or wife. I have a feeling, if that was on the line for you, that you would not be so flippant about such a nomination, right? Um, and similarly to if you were having straight sex, if you had straight sex in the privacy of your own home, but somebody else caught wind that you were having sex, would you still be okay that like the police could show up and arrest you for that? Because that's what happened to gay people for a very long time in many parts of this country, and it's something that could happen again should Supreme Court rulings be overturned. So stuff like that is for real, on the line with this Amy Coney Barrett nomination. Now, it's quite likely that she will still get onto the bench, which is unfortunate. But we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.